B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, February 16th, 2018. As we head into the President's holiday weekend, I'll be taking the day off on Monday, like most Americans. We'll have more news and comment for you on Tuesday, as usual. Robert Mueller dropped what appears to be a bomb today, but it's a dud. 13 Russians have been indicted, along with the St. Petersburg troll farm that is accused of being the center of social media efforts to influence the American election and shift it to Trump. In a 37-page indictment drawn from grand jury proceedings in the District of Columbia, 13 Russian nationals are named, along with the Internet Research Agency, LLC. Defendants knowingly and intentionally conspired with each other and with persons known and unknown to defraud the United States by impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful functions of the government through fraud and deceit for the purpose of interfering with the U.S. political and electoral process, including the presidential election of 2016. The indictment continues at paragraph 4. Defendants, posing as U.S. persons and creating false U.S. personas, operated social media pages and groups designed to attract U.S. audiences. These groups and pages, which address divisive U.S. political and social issues, falsely claimed to be controlled by U.S. activists when, in fact, they were controlled by defendants. Defendants also used the stolen identities of real U.S. persons to post on organization-controlled social media accounts. Over time, these social media accounts became defendants' means to reach significant numbers of Americans for purposes of interfering with the U.S. political system, including the presidential election. Some of the defendants traveled to the United States under false pretenses and failed to get proper visas. So those are the central allegations contained in this indictment. And what you don't see is any reference to collusion with the Trump campaign. In fact, the indictment says that there may have been unwitting connections with members of a Trump campaign, but at this point it's really far-fetched, like a Republican official in Florida who was contacted about one of those rallies that was being organized from abroad by this Russian troll farm. Now, this is, to me, a dud, because we know these 13 Russian nationals will never come to the United States to face trial. These allegations will just live. They will linger out there. They will be taken as proof by partisans like the Democratic Party, supporters of Hillary Clinton, and Rachel Maddow and her cohorts at MSNBC. They're going to say, see, Mueller knows that Russians used social media to manipulate the campaign in favor of Trump. And I hope by now you've had a chance to listen to my news and comment podcast from yesterday. Because after I reviewed the forensic study that Politico did of the use of the Release the Memo hashtag, which Politico claimed was amplified by Russians, and therefore that's what made Trump decide to release that memo, this is the kind of irrational, harebrained argument that we are hearing about these matters. The Mueller indictment doesn't put into context that the St. Petersburg operation was competing with $85 million of paid advertising on Facebook by the Trump campaign and unknown amounts of social media activity that was initiated or amplified by the campaign itself. It's believed that Trump's people focused more on Twitter for that particular angle. And we know that Hillary Clinton had a major operation run by David Brock using a dark money super PAC called Correct the Record. And I defy you to send me any notice of coverage of those contextual issues that I just mentioned. Not only that, Mueller goes into detail about some of the names that were used, appropriated, about some of the links that were put out, and I don't think he goes into hashtags in this particular indictment, but I haven't had time to read all 37 pages. And in my in-depth interview that I'm releasing later today with Yasha Levine, maybe you've heard me interview Yasha before. He was born in St. Petersburg, emigrated to the United States at the age of 9. He's a U.S. citizen. He studied computer science at UC Berkeley and then decided to become a journalist. And his powerful new book out is Surveillance Valley, The Secret Military History of the Internet. And our timing was pretty good today, as Yasha arrived at the secret studio just about an hour after I was able to print out a copy of Mueller's indictment. And Yasha Levine points out that the Russian media exposed this St. Petersburg troll farm 5 years ago. So this is hardly news.
5 years, I think. I think the story about the internet troll farm in St. Petersburg first was written about in Russian media by Russian journalists were the first to expose it, you know. Mm-hmm. I think it was 2013, 2014. So we've known about the existence of this troll farm, which does all sorts of work, it seems. It's not just government work, but it does commercial stuff. It's not even clear what it does. But we've known about this place. There have been interviews with people who used to work there. I mean, the Russian media has profiled it in many, many different ways. And American journalists and Western journalists have taken that story and re-reported it. Also, you know, it seems like every several months it comes to the fore again and resurfaces as something new. And so the fact that the Mueller investigation, after all this time, all that they could produce was just the fact that this internet agency, research agency exists, and that these are the people who were working for it and who were somehow involved in purchasing ads or interacting with Americans, posing themselves as Americans, you know, through their Twitter accounts. It seems like it's incredible because we know that the world has known about this, and our intelligence agencies should have known about this and should have known about this while the election was happening. And so the fact that this is the revelation, it shows that, it shows that they have nothing, and that most likely we're being given this stuff, and this stuff is being rolled out to show that there was some kind of result.
That's Yasha Levine, and I want to recommend our in-depth interview that goes into great detail about the history of the Internet, the military history. It takes us back to Sputnik, to the U.S. response to the space race and to the Cold War in the late 1950s. And a visionary but somewhat misguided fellow who used the nickname Lick. His name was J.C.R. Licklider. He had a vision for a connected network of computers that he wrote about in 1960. And Levine tells us that from the get-go, surveillance was baked into the networks that were developed. And so it's a fascinating look at the history of the Internet. We have a wide-ranging discussion, including current issues like those I'm about to address with The Intercept and James Risen. He has critical comments about Ed Snowden, and in particular, about the way that Snowden and his allies continue to promote the Tor encryption system as if it is safe. And that's where Yasha has done some incredible work in exposing the funding and operation of Tor and raising serious questions about its integrity as an encryption system for the average person. I also got Yasha to talk a little bit about how Ed Snowden's all of the files that he took from the NSA have ended up at The Intercept, and yet we have no idea how many there were, whether we will ever get coverage or disclosure on many of them. We don't even have full disclosure on some of the programs that have been partly covered by Glenn Greenwald and his colleagues. And one of the new writers at The Intercept is a celebrated former New York Times investigative reporter, James Risen. And Risen has a great reputation. After all, he was one of the people, along with Eric Lichtblau, who exposed the NSA's domestic surveillance program back in 2005. He wanted to do it in 2004, but his editors at the New York Times blocked the story at the request of the White House. So James Risen has that residual, very positive image as a guy who has challenged the government and the intelligence community, called out their lies, challenged their violations of our constitutional rights. But in a really sorry first installment of a promised 4-part series called Trump and Russia, Risen headlines it with, "Is Donald Trump a traitor?" Now, I'm not offended by somebody asking that question. But what is annoying is when you read Risen's piece and he embraces the unproven claims of the intelligence community that he has so long been a critic of. And while he raises the question, has Trump, is he guilty of treason? Is he a traitor? He admits, as a practical matter, the special counsel is highly unlikely to pursue treason charges against Trump or his associates. Treason is vaguely defined in the law, very difficult to prove. To the extent that it is defined as providing aid and comfort to an enemy of the United States, the question might come down to whether Russia is legally considered America's enemy. And he says later in his article, evidence of the connections between Trump's bid for the White House and Russian ambitions to manipulate the 2016 U.S. election keep piling up. Throughout late 2016 and early 2017, a series of reports from the intelligence community and other government agencies underlined and reinforced nearly every element of the Russian hacking narrative. But it didn't prove it, Jimmy. It may have underlined and reinforced the narrative that they generated, and he doesn't appear to be skeptical at all. And let's see what else he says here. There can be little doubt now that Russian intelligence officials were behind an effort to hack the DNC's computers and steal emails and other information from aides to Hillary Clinton as a means of damaging her presidential campaign. Well, I'm sorry, there is significant doubt. And maybe I'm the only one in America who holds that position, but I don't think so. And so James Risen has joined the gang. And we haven't seen Glenn Greenwald, who has the prime perch there at The Intercept and who remains skeptical of the Russiagate narrative. We haven't seen him challenge his stablemate, James Risen, on these very significant matters. Steve Bannon was up on Capitol Hill and frustrated members of both parties in the House Intelligence Committee interview. He sticks to a script, will only answer questions about 25 pre-approved topics, pre-approved by the White House. And the committee subpoenaed Bannon last week or last month after he refused to answer their questions, and he is still holding out. And Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat, said that while Bannon claims executive privilege, he said Bannon not only refused to answer questions about meetings he had attended and conversations he had had during that entire period of time after the campaign, but went so far as to refuse to answer questions about conversations he had after he left the administration and with people who played no role in the administration. There is no plausible claim of privilege that could apply to those circumstances. And while I'm often critical of Adam Schiff, he is correct about this. And we believe that Bannon has been interviewed several times by investigators for the Mueller special counsel operation, and the leaks indicate that he is being more forthcoming there. Now, maybe this is a Fifth Amendment issue, that he doesn't want to testify and incriminate himself in an open setting and have that testimony compared to what he tells Mueller's investigators. And that's always one of the problems with the parallel operation of a special counsel and congressional committees. So this is going to continue, and we will continue to watch it. And just to recap my position, friends, I believe Trump is running a cover-up. I believe it is of his ugly and corrupt business ties to many Russian entities, and it may lead to the Russian government. But we haven't seen any proof that he is actually compromised, that he has committed treason, that he is a traitor who is under the thumb of Putin. And those are very serious charges. And it is so uncomfortable for me to be perceived as defending Trump. I don't defend Trump. I think he's a liar and a lowlife. But I have to follow the evidence. And we have been carried along on a wave of hysteria based on anonymous leaks, calculated leaks, and sources who are never identified. And allegations are treated as fact. And journalism has almost disappeared when it comes to this particular case. Well, it's pretty clear now as Congress wraps up and heads to a holiday break. They'll be off next week, working in the district, of course, for the president's holiday break. And by design, the Senate produced no development on immigration this week. They threw up a bunch of bills that they knew could not get 60 votes. The president was over there undermining any effort of senators to put together compromise by threatening to veto things that didn't include his wall. And so what's very clear now is that the Democrats got played. And when Chuck Schumer made the deal with Mitch McConnell a couple of weeks ago to decouple the DACA issue from the budget, he left the Dreamers in the hostage situation that Trump created for them. This allowed Trump to play the good cop, saying, I want to deal with DACA. I've even extended it to 1 million extra people. How swell can I be? I just want my wall. And the Democrats played really bad defense on this particular issue. And it remains to be seen. As I pointed out, the courts have put the decision by Trump to end the DACA program on hold. It will likely be appealed further. And so the March 5th date is not the hard and fast deadline that we might think, but who knows when the courts might rule. Who knows if Trump might start to deport Dreamers just to prove that he could. And we heard Chuck Schumer kind of secretly hoping that this would end up where Trump starts deporting Dreamers and then the Democrats can shame him using bad publicity. But they don't realize, or they're not willing to admit, that this is a man who has no shame and cannot be shamed. We'll get to the Trump harlots in just a couple of minutes here. Every day I take a moment to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like George Rees, Patrick Garay, Benny Alto, and Judy Holloway, just to name a few. And I'd like you to join them. Come on over to peterbcollins.com if you value the independent work I do here, the skeptical, unaligned voice that I offer you on a daily basis. Well, if you've got a little extra cash, I invite you to support it. Just hit peterbcollins.com, click on the menu tab, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and you can be all set in just a couple of minutes with a subscription that fits your budget. I do want to mention that since the end of January, people who use iTunes to manage the PBC podcast saw an interruption in the feed. It wasn't intentional, but it was a ripple effect of other things that we were trying to fix in the website. And so if you've had any problems with iTunes, try closing iTunes and reopening it. Try restarting your computer, because we believe we've fixed the problem. But I want to acknowledge we're still getting some reports of people who are unable to access certain podcasts from the last couple of weeks. And, of course, if your iTunes isn't working, the podcasts are always hosted at peterbcollins.com, and the News and Comment podcasts are always available on YouTube. Just search for Peter B. Collins and look for the page that's got my dog Chloe's picture at the top. And if you visit that page, click on the subscribe button. You don't have to pay any money. It just enhances my status with YouTube. Well, Israel's got a lot on its plate right now. Benjamin Netanyahu is facing corruption charges. He denies it all. But forces are building that could see him ousted sometime in the foreseeable future. And in a pretty honest piece in the New York Times today, The two Times reporters based in Jerusalem, David Halbfinger and Isabel Kirshner, described the history of division that really is the major political tool of Bibi Netanyahu. And they quote Shlomo Aveneri, a professor emeritus of political science at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He thrives on dividing people exactly like Trump. And one of the pages that he's picking up from Trump is attacking immigrants in Israel and dividing the population by pandering to racism and extreme Zionism. And there's a new deportation plan for African migrants who've been seeking asylum in Israel. They're being offered plane tickets to African nations that they're not from, and there are about 40,000 in this migrant population who are believed to fit a refugee profile. And in Israel, Netanyahu says we're taking action against illegal immigrants who come here for work purposes. But that's not true. They are there because they have run for their lives. And they're threatening to put the male asylum seekers, about half of the population, 20,000, in jail. They're offering $3,500 in airfare and travel assistance for anybody who agrees to leave by the end of March. But it is a divisive strategy, trying to shore up Netanyahu's political fortunes. And those were rumpled a little bit this week by the comments that Trump made. I reported them earlier in the week from the Israeli newspaper where he gave the interview, and the New York Times is just picking up on it today in some of the reaction. White House officials are saying that Netanyahu's potential charges would have no impact on any peace plan put forward by the United States. But clearly, there are problems between Trump and Netanyahu because he told Israel Hayam over the weekend, this past weekend, that he was concerned about the growth of Jewish settlements on the West Bank and that he doesn't think the Israelis or the Palestinians are that interested in peace right now. So this could be the deal maker, just trying to throw people off base and get them to come to him. Or it just could be nonsense. And given Trump, I'll let you pick. So I'm using the term harlots. Donald Trump reportedly had sexual contacts, sexual encounters with a porn star who used the name Stormy Daniels and a former Playboy playmate whose name is Karen McDougal. So we know about Stormy. She got $130,000 of Michael Cohen's own money to keep quiet last October, or October of 2016. And now she says that because Cohen has gone public and acknowledged that he made those payments, that she is ready to bolt on her non-disclosure agreement, the hush money gag order that she signed for the $130,000. So expect to hear a lot from Stormy Daniels in the near future. And Karen McDougal she says that she had a 9-month on and off affair with Trump back in 2006, the same time he was allegedly seeing Stormy Daniels, and just after his new wife Melania had given birth to their son Barron. And Karen McDougal sold her story to the National Enquirer, and then they didn't publish it. It appeared to be a scheme by David Pecker, who's a close friend of Trump and who runs the National Enquirer, to try to help Trump. So McDougal signed an agreement on August 5th of 2016, giving the publisher exclusive rights to her account of any relationship with any then married man. And half the payment went to 3 men who had helped arrange the deal. So McDougal feels hosed, and she says that, she shared her story with The New Yorker, and her account is based on an 8-page note that she wrote at the time of her relationship with Trump. And, of course, he'll deny it all. And we're not going to see any action from the Republican-controlled Congress to bring Trump to justice on these kinds of issues. The FBI is now admitting that not just the tip from the video blogger in Mississippi about Nicholas Cruz they failed to properly follow up on it. There was a second warning. A tipster contacted the FBI in January, someone described as close to Nicholas Cruz, warning that he owned a gun, might conduct a school shooting. The tipster said Cruz had a desire to kill people, erratic behavior, and disturbing social media posts, and advised the FBI of the potential of conducting a school shooting. And the FBI, in a rare admission, said, "We have determined that these protocols were not followed for the information received. The information was not provided to the FBI Miami field office, and no further investigation was conducted at that time." And as I pointed out yesterday, the FBI has a very different approach to Muslim Americans. When they get a tip, they deploy paid informants, FBI undercover agents, and they frame these people into plots that typically are well beyond anything that they could have dreamed up themselves. But when it comes to a white guy, a guy with ties to a white nationalist group in Florida, the FBI has a very different standard. And it's just one element of the failures of this agency. And as you know, it drives me bonkers that so many people on the left today are embracing the FBI because they see it as a way to take down Trump. Reince Priebus, he didn't write a book, but he gave an interview to Chris Whipple, who has a book coming out in early March called The Gatekeepers, How the White House Chiefs of Staff Define Every Presidency. And Priebus told Whipple that trying to manage Donald Trump was like riding an untamed horse. Priebus struggled as none of his predecessors had before in a job that is historically among the toughest in Washington. Take everything you've heard and multiply it by 50, Priebus said. Working for Trump was like riding the strongest and most independent horse. And, of course, Priebus got caught in the crossfire between Trump and Jeff Sessions. After the firing of Bob Comey, when Trump screamed at Sessions for recusing himself in the Russia investigation, at that point, Jeff Sessions threatened to resign, and Reince Priebus ran out to the White House parking lot and got Jeff Sessions to come back in. They tried to talk some sense into him. He nevertheless did submit a resignation that same night, but Priebus says that he and Steve Bannon persuaded Trump not to accept it. I'm sure there'll be more tell-all books coming out from this White House, and as we've seen, our ability to be shocked is being sharply reduced by every one of these revelations. We now have 2 district federal courts and their respective appeals courts ruling against Trump's presidential travel decree, the Travel Ban 3.0. The United States Court of Appeal for the Fourth Circuit, that's Richmond, Virginia, ruled that the latest effort to limit travel is going to be suspended for the most part. And the issue is fundamentally about Trump's racist intention. The Fourth Circuit, in a 9-4 vote, ruled that the latest ban, like an earlier one, most likely violated the Constitution's Establishment Clause, which forbids religious discrimination by the government. The majority based its conclusion in large measure on statements Trump has made as a candidate and while in office. So, yeah, he keeps shooting himself in the foot, and he seems to enjoy it. We learned in the last 24 hours, through a report from the Trump Inaugural Committee, that a close friend of Melania's, who filed to open a business just a month before the inauguration, her firm was paid $26 million for the inauguration. Now another $25 million went to a professional event management firm that has put on inaugural festivities in the past. But the total amount raised was $107 million. And I just gave you the two biggest billers, which is about $51 million. So there's a lot of party cash that was dumped into the Trump inaugural committee, and we don't know where all of it went. And while I often criticize Rachel Maddow for her obsession with Trump and with Russia, she deserves credit for covering the issues of the inaugural expenditures and where the money went. David Shulkin, who runs the Veterans Affairs Department, he says that people are trying to get him fired. And he's putting on a full-court press, not to be forced to resign because of a huge travel tab when he went to Europe and he took his wife. And he's offering to reimburse for his wife's airfare. He said those Wimbledon tickets came from a good friend. That's not a violation of the rules. And Shulkin actually seemed to be doing a decent job at the VA. He is a medical doctor who continues to see patients, and he does seem to be a pretty legitimate hands-on operator there. So we'll have to follow and see if he does get bounced. Also, Scott Pruitt over at the EPA says that it was his security team that requires him to travel first class, because when he did travel in coach, people cussed at him. Over at the Federal Communications Commission, their Inspector General is looking into the way the commission changed the rules to enable Sinclair Broadcasting to buy up all those TV stations from the Tribune Company to become the largest single TV station owner in the country. And as you may know, Sinclair has a pronounced right-wing bent, even worse than Fox News. So Frank Pallone, Democrat in the House from New Jersey, is the guy we can credit with pressuring the Inspector General to look into that. And I'm going to wrap up with a couple of quick mentions from the Empire Notes. Rexon Tillerson, who plays Secretary of State in this administration, went to Jordan this week, and despite Trump's opposition to foreign aid in general and foreign aid that doesn't allow him to manipulate the people who receive it, Rexon Tillerson increased foreign aid to Jordan, giving it a raise of 27% and a 5-year contract. Now, this may be part of a bigger scheme to pick off the supporters of the Palestinians who are neighbors of Israel and the West Bank and Gaza. But it is unusual, and we'll keep an eye on that. In Kuwait City this week, a group of rich nations gathered and together pledged about $30 billion to help rebuild war-torn Iraq. The U.S. sat on the sidelines here, and I have mixed feelings. Because, of course, we are responsible for the carnage, the destruction of the nation of Iraq. But Peter Van Buren, who's been a guest on this program many times, who wrote the book We Meant Well, described the massive waste of money, some of which he was personally charged to carry out on meaningless reconstruction projects in Iraq. So while I really feel for the people of Iraq and I feel a sense of responsibility as an American, I'm not sure that pouring any more money in there will do any good at this time. And finally, this really rung a bell for me because the nation of Pakistan has been following developments here in the United States, and they figure if Trump can build a wall on the Mexican border and try to get Mexico to pay for it, that Pakistan will ask the United States to pay for an 1,800-mile wall along their border with Afghanistan. Now, this doesn't cost that much. They're only asking for $500 million. It is a 10-foot wire fence. But it just shows how crazy ideas can be infectious. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. I'll be back at you on Tuesday. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends. I'd appreciate it. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you.